My name is Tom Barnes. I am the CEO of Category Partners. We're a data analytics and consumer research firm, and we specialize in produce and in the perishable industries. And so we work mainly with grower shippers in building their demand and bringing out new products and things like that. And so everything that we're going to be talking about is mostly retail related, but going off with the grower spin on it. And with me is Lonnie Gillespie, and she's the Chief Organic Officer of Farm Fresh Direct of America. And so what does Chief Organic Officer mean, Lonnie?
You're not the first person to ask me that. It means that really what I did throughout the years, I've been there almost 21 years. And so when I started with the organic program, I started out not, of course, in that program. And we started the organic program, we had about half a circle, about 60 acres, 120 depending on the year. And now we have between 2,600 and 3,200 acres of organic potatoes, and then others that we help sell and manage. So that's kind of just the growth of the organic program throughout the years and things like that. That's where that title came from.
I guess that helps to say that Farm Fresh Direct of America is a potato grower shipper out of the San Luis Valley.
Yes.
But you do have production in quite a few different areas of the country, correct?
We do. San Luis Valley is home, and of course where the largest portion of our growers and farms are, but we do have farms kind of scattered across the United States. So.
Yeah, that's awesome. And how much organic production do you think, percentage-wise, and I know you don't know this 100%, but percentage-wise, where do you think Farm Fresh sits with organic potatoes as a whole?
With our overall production?
Yeah.
So we sit right around, we kind of bounce between that 9 and 11%, sit right around 10% of our potato sales are organic versus conventional.
Okay, great. Awesome. Well, let me get through some of the beginning, just explaining what we're going to be talking about today, and then we can have a conversation through these numbers. So what we're going to show you today are a bunch of numbers from Nielsen IQ. Nielsen IQ is a syndicated data set. They track all retailers across the US, and they are a connected partner of ours, Category Partners. And so we are thankful that they allow us to use this data in settings like this and allow to share the numbers with you. And so today we're going to be talking about just total US and XAOC. I know that's kind of a weird acronym. It's theirs. It basically just means all retail, including supercenters like Walmart and Target, and also club stores and C-stores. And then we're going to talk at a very high level. It's all going to be, well, except at the very end, produce department specific, and that is defined as fruits, vegetables, and then there are some ancillaries like nuts and some salad dressings. The time frame that we're going to be talking about, so you'll be seeing a lot of year-over-year comparisons and things like that. When we have those comparisons, it's the most recent 13 weeks, ending 9/24. So it's Q3. And that's Matt Seeley's fault for that time frame. That's what he wanted me to talk about and kind of go through. So these are the Q3 numbers of organics in the produce department. A couple definitions. Volume, when I say the word volume, I'm talking about a pound equivalent, not units. So bulk would be 1, a 5-pound bag would be 5, right? So we equivalize that. YOY, you'll see that acronym. It means year over year, or it's basically just a comparison of the same exact time frame from last year. And then delta year over year is basically change year over year. So with that, let's run through some numbers, shall we? And see how organics did in the Q3 of 2022. So first we have dollars. $2.4 billion was sold at retail in organics. That's a 4.1% change year over year. So comparing Q3 of this year compared to 2021 Q3, we've gained 4.1% in organics in dollars, okay? And right now, in dollars, organics represent 12% of the total produce department. When we look at volume, we're at 753 million pounds of organics sold, and it's down 4.4% year over year. So up in dollars, down in volume. There's got to be something about price probably somewhere in here. I'm sure we're going to talk about that most likely ad nauseum.
That'll come up. Yeah.
Slightly. And in volume, 7% of produce department. So 12% in dollars, 7% in volume basically means that organics are also higher priced, which is another thing that is kind of important and to realize. And the last metric that, for this slide at least, is distribution, also known as percent ACV, which can kind of be kind of a funky metric, but basically what it's saying is of everything, of all retail, all stores, what is the percent of organic distribution? So for Q3 of 2022, we had almost an 82% distribution across retail. What's crazy is it's down almost 2 percentage points from last year. So organic distribution actually declined in Q3 of 2022. What do you think about that?
You know, so of everything that we're seeing here, I think that is one of the most perplexing numbers that we're going to see, and maybe one of the more concerning, because the last thing that you want to see is organics not being available on all store shelves, or see that reduction in the distribution of it, because it can be very difficult to get that back.
Yeah.
To get that space back, to get that distribution back. And so of all of the numbers as we go through these, I think that's the one we're going to want to keep the eye on the most.
Right.
And as marketing companies, as growers, as things like that, that's the one that we're going to want to keep pushing forward and making sure that we keep our share of that distribution.
Yeah. Well, and the crazy thing is I've been watching organics for a long time. And Nielsen will show a couple of 5-year views, but I mean, I've been looking at organics and the organic numbers for probably 15 plus years. I've never seen a distribution number go down in organic. This is the first year that I've actually seen a decline in distribution in organics. Because for so long it was so new, and so many more new products were coming out in organic, and more categories were getting into organic, and and so it's just been this ball, kind of rolling downhill, that snowball rolling downhill and getting bigger and bigger. And so to all of a sudden see a 2 percentage point decline in distribution, it was shocking actually to me the first time. So why? Did you have any guesses on why? I mean, what do you think? Why do you think distribution would be down? And this is just us talking here.
Yeah.
But I know there's a couple of reasons that we've
Sure.
kind of identified. So
Sure. I think that we've seen in several commodities a couple of tough years. Mm-hmm. A couple of tough growing years where the growers experienced some real quality issues, some real maybe declines in, I speak hundredweight because we're potatoes, but real declines in the amount, pounds that they're getting and that are available on the store shelf. Mm-hmm. I think you're also seeing just a ton of pressure. We've all heard about, truck prices, about, how are you going to fill the truck to be the most, beneficial, the most cost efficient for the retailer? What are you going to put on it? How are you going to maximize shelf space? Retailers are struggling with labor. Growers are struggling with labor. And all of these pressures come together, and something has to kind of be squeezed out. Yeah. And what we don't want is to see really much more of that squeeze out be on the organic side, because we already represent a smaller portion of the produce department. So that distribution, that's, like I said, again, that's something that we probably need to watch the most, because we don't want to lose the space that we have. Right. Because to continue growth, we have to have that distribution and that shelf space.
Yeah, and I think another part of that distribution decline is really, it is price driven. Because prices are going up, both on organic and conventional produce, all across the board. I think retailers, at least at everything that we've done, we work with almost all the retailers across the country. We hear that a lot, that they're trying to find the right mix of products for a consumer that is being stretched thin on their dollar. Gas prices are up. Everything they have to buy is up. And one of the things they feel like the consumer can control is their grocery budget. And so we're going to talk a lot more about this, so I don't want to like get ahead of myself here. But I think that is definitely part of it, is the retailer trying to figure out that mix, that assortment, and some of them thinking, maybe organic, high-priced organics isn't the right thing for me, and changing that assortment a little bit. So let's dig deeper into these numbers a little bit, have a little more conversation. So this is a 5-year dollar trend. The lighter green, that is green, right? Green, blue, whatever that color is. The lighter one, that's conventional, and then the darker is organic. So you can see conventional for 2022 was up 8.8%, and as we already mentioned, organic was up 4.1%. So organic actually gained almost double the percentage points in dollars compared to organic. And if you look at the trend, the Q3s of the last 5 years, this is the first time that organics actually did not outperform conventionals in dollars. And we're going to see the same thing in volume.
Yes.
Why do you think that is? Other than we've talked about distribution, what else do you think?
So this is a really interesting trend, and I think from a grower perspective, you see these numbers and it takes your breath away a little bit, because we've talked about, from a grower perspective, the grower has to get more for growing organic produce. Mm-hmm. I was at an OPN speaker several years ago. Lots of years ago, and COVID has distorted my view on time. So it's been a long time ago.
It's distorted a lot of things, not just your view on time.
And so there was a speaker, and of course there's retailers in the audience and a few growers sprinkled in there, but he was talking about how the goal of the retailers at that time was organic produce has to be really close to the same price or the same price as conventional. And the retailers are like, yay, that's what we want to see it. And the growers are like, then there won't be any organic produce on the shelf, because there has to be a premium for growing organics because of the costs, because of the lower yields, all those things. I don't know that we want to panic right away about this percentage difference, because while you do have to have an increase over conventional prices to make it work for the grower, we've seen those percentages hold at really high rates. And so I think the question is, do they have to hold at that high of a percentage?
Yeah.
And as the cost of conventionals grow, is there a percentage you have in mind that you absolutely have to have over, that conventional, or is it a dollar amount? Because it starts to distort a little the higher the actual price gets. Yeah. So I don't know if it's good to put a set percentage that we have to, the grower has to have over conventional, as long as they're still making enough to make that profitable.
Yeah. No, I think you're dead on there, and I'm glad that you said don't panic yet, and because when we look at these numbers, it being an organic grower, it is a little concerning. We've had such good numbers for so long in organics that seeing this kind of decline, it could make people hit the panic button, right, and really start to change what they're doing. And I think we'll talk more about that and what we think is going to happen in the future. But there is definitely right now, due to a lot of different factors, that organics are struggling a little bit. Let's show the volume trend just really quick. So we see that organics down 4.4%. Conventional was also down 1.5%. Which is also not surprising when you think of the price increases both in conventional and organic. And you see it overall, so that top number on top of the bars, that's the overall produce number, conventional and organic combined. And you see the last two Q3s, produce actually declined in volume. Not as many people consuming and purchasing fresh produce. And it's a lot of that is based off of price. But even in 2021, when conventionals were down 2.3%, organics were up 1.1%. Even in 2021, organic was able to gain at least a little bit after the ridiculous 2020 that we all had to deal with. And so conventionals kind of corrected, but organics still were able to gain just a little bit. Then we get to 2022, and all of a sudden you see volume decline, significantly in organic. And I really think that there's a consumer out there that is I call them a fence sitter with organic. They may or may not buy organic, just depending on price and availability and quality and all of those things that the consumer is looking for within their fresh produce. And right now, because of the way that the dollar is being stretched thin, that organic is, having a hard time with that. So, Lonnie, if we were to add another bar, Q3 2023, where do you think that's going to land? What do you think is going to happen with organics? I
would hope to see that it has at least stabilized and where we're not losing, any more of that percentage. Mm-hmm. It's hard to say as far as the produce department overall, because really my biggest focus is potatoes on the organic side.
Well, and you speak to your expertise, of course, but.
And so potatoes, I think we're going to be able, for the most part, to probably hold our ground on the store shelves, and I'm hoping its just distribution doesn't go down. However, we are seeing some pressures already on availability across the country and things like that on organic potatoes, which is just a direct result of what the growers are dealing with right now across the country with growing conditions and costs and things like that. So I think it's going to be really important to watch this data as we go forward and make sure that the growers or the marketers themselves don't add to this pressure by making a knee-jerk reaction based on data kind of that you see like this, and maybe pull some ground out of organics or things like that because conventionals are growing or because conventionals look like they're performing better. Because I really do think that this is something that we can come out of. Yeah, well, and really we have had 3 very strange years, and it was one thing after another that just kind of keeps hitting and causing these pressures. Obviously 2020 was COVID and the pandemic and the quarantine and everything that happened there, which was huge for produce. Everything sold off the shelves just as quickly as possible, so we see these big numbers. But then 2021, we started to see everything started to rise. The inflation was starting to set in a little bit. There was a correction there after an incredible 2020. But in 2022, because of the higher inflation, the war in Ukraine, and everything else that's causing inputs to be higher, and obviously all of the transportation issues that we've had, and the rumblings that we're still hearing, about rail and everything else that could still start to disrupt everything, that we work for. It's very interesting to see what 2023 is going to is going to happen. If I do data for a living, right? I look for trends. I look for what's going to happen the next year, and we try and predict that future based on historical. The margin of error for 2023 is ridiculous, because of all of the different, variables that just have never hit us really before, and you just never know what crisis is going to be next. You don't. I think that some of the important numbers that you're seeing, I'm looking at my screen, the screen's over there, that you're looking at is that you see that huge jump in 2020 of 19%, and you see that overall grew to 7%. Mm-hmm. And I think the numbers really to focus on is that we still haven't lost that 7%. We haven't gone, haven't lost what we gained there in 2020. Yeah. So I think keeping an eye on that number is probably going to be what we need to focus on, at least until everything kind of stabilizes and we can put a little bit more meaningful trend lines through the data that we have.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Well, let's look at the price. Let's kind of run through that a little bit. So here's a 5-year trend, both the conventional and organic, on where that price, and again, this is an average number across all produce, across all commodities. And so very high level, obviously we'd want to dig into each category because not all categories are the same. Right. They're definitely not created equal, and we'll get into that a little bit, in comparison with potatoes. But, you see in Q3 2022, conventionals is at $1.68 with a 10.6% increase. Where organics at $3.21, which is a 9.1% increase. So percentage-wise, conventionals actually have gone up in price more than organics. Does that surprise you?
Not at all.
Really?
No.
How come?
Sitting at the sales desk still and kind of feeling that pressure, the pressure that we're getting from retailers to try to tame some of these, and the pressure that they're getting from the consumer, organics just didn't have that upward price trajectory that conventionals did. And so as we were raising prices and trying, to make sure that potatoes were on the shelves and, produce on the shelves and things like that, organics just did not quite have that upward momentum that conventionals did. And being in the grocery store and watching people shop, there's a perceived expense to organic. And to your point, right, the consumers that would really prefer organic, but it's not, ingrained as part of their lifestyle, I think they could actually be the same price, and those consumers are going to pick up conventional because of that perceived higher price on organics. Yeah. So the psychological state that consumers are in right now with inflation and just the pressure on the dollar is interesting, and I think you're seeing that play out here. Yeah,
I actually did it was kind of fun. We were working with a retailer. I'll try and keep everything anonymous. Hopefully I don't slip. But we were working with a retailer, and a new buyer in a commodity came over from a mostly organic retailer, and he wanted to bring in organics, in a bigger way, which I thought was great. But what he wanted to do was remove his conventional item and replace it with an organic equivalent. So same bag, same price. But remove the conventional and just have the organic. And I kind of shook my head, but it's kind of hard to tell a retailer no. I don't know if you realize this or not, but when they say they're right, it's really hard to tell them they're wrong. But anyway, so that's what he did. He talked the growers into the shippers into supplying this organic at the exact same price as the conventional, and his numbers went down, and he was shocked. Really it was because he had forgotten that, especially in the US, we love to comparison shop. We love to have a myriad of choices, right? And so where he didn't have the conventional and the organic sitting right next to each other, then people thought, oh, organic, it's expensive. I'm not going to buy that. And if he had had a conventional and then the organic, and probably at the same price, he would have done very well. Those that still wanted to buy organic would have bought organic or conventional, but those that saw that price difference and thought, you know what, organic is better for me, it's better for my family, it's healthier. Hey, it's at the same price, great, I'm going to buy this organic, and his numbers would have gone up. But because he just did that switch, there's just that mentality still, right, with the consumer.
Still there.
And honestly, it's a good mentality, in my opinion. Oh, don't hit the mic. In my opinion, it's a good mentality because, again, my opinion. But with everything that we see, I don't think organic should ever be the same price as conventionals. I think the inputs are more, and I think the consumer is okay with that because there is a benefit to that. What do you think about that?
Right. So at Farm Fresh, we are a grower-owned company, and so the growers are in our office, on the phone with us all the time. And so we know firsthand from dealing with growers, conventional and organic, they cannot produce organic potatoes at the same price that they produce conventionals. They have, the yields come in a little lower. You don't have all the tools in your toolbox when you do have an issue, in the bin or somewhere, and so it's just not there. You have to have a higher price per unit, per pound, per hundredweight, whatever you're talking about, just so the grower can make the same money as a conventional grower. And then you kind of look at where those benefits lie when you're talking about being stewards of the land, and you're talking about what you're doing for the environment and all the good that you're doing by growing this way. And it has to be more, or the growers just really can't do it. There might be a few commodities out there, a couple come to mind, where organic and conventional are the same, just because you maybe harvest things so small or things like that. But overall, it's just not doable and sustainable for the grower.
That's interesting. Yeah, and especially in those larger commodities like potatoes, heavier, a lot more into it. Right. That's interesting. So where do you think that gap should be? Yeah, I mean, I know you can't just put your finger directly on it, but I mean, is it like right here? In fact, we can go to the next slide, and then we can kind of talk about that. So let me run through this slide really quick, and then I'll go back to that question that I just asked you. But we've actually seen the gap between organic and conventional produce get smaller every single year over the last 5 years and even before that. So, back in 2018 in Q3, it was 110% of the price. So, if conventional was $1, then, organics would be $2.10, right? And we've seen that, and now in Q3 of 2022, it's only 90%. So that's that gap, right? And 90% higher than the conventional. Is that the right place? Should it get smaller? Should it become bigger again? What do you think?
So I don't know that we talked about this, I don't know that I love percentages.
Sure.
Because as overall price grows, as we see inflation, something that used to cost $10 maybe now costs $15. So do you still need to hold 90% of $15, or do you still need 90% of that 10 and you can still make it work, it's still profitable for the organic grower? So I think as organic farming practices, as we continue to improve them and we get better at it and things like that, that you can naturally see maybe a shrinking of that percentage. So I don't think that you can put a pin in it and say it has to be 90%, 100%, 50%. And I also think it's very dependent on the commodity.
Right.
Yes. Maybe potatoes versus apples versus, baby lettuce, things like that.
Yeah.
What the growers need on that increase to make it worth their time and to make it worth their risks is going to be a little different by commodity.
Yeah. No, I think that's really important. I mean, it really is. It matters about category, and each category is going to be different. And also, I think depending on how big it's already become, and we'll talk a little bit about percentages of each of the categories here in a little bit. But before we get there, one thing that we do a lot of consumer research, and so we're trying to listen to that vibe and what's going on. And one of the things that we hear a lot about is because produce is gaining in price. We're continually upping those prices, and honestly, not as high as some other things out there in the store. But we get accused of greedflation. And instead of saying, oh, well, our inputs now rose this much, so we're going to raise our price this much. And instead it's, oh, we have this opportunity to make more money, so we're going to up our price even though our inputs didn't go up. How do you feel about that? Like if you're accused of greedflation, Lonnie, what would you say to those people?
I'd be offended.
Hey, thank you. I'm glad you said that. We actually didn't script this at all, by the way. This is just a straight up conversation here. But,
I'm going to kick him later for a couple of these questions, but it's fine. So, I mean, that is absolutely, something that I think that we need to keep in mind. But again, we're such a grower-based organization, and so we're out I'm out in the fields, I'm out watching the issues, I see the look on some of the growers' faces. I see it on a couple of yours out there too. You're like, oh, this yield, these inputs. I don't think at least that our growers and the growers that we deal with are asking for anything right now that isn't fair.
Right.
Are there people out there that would? Sure. There's always people that are going to take advantage of a situation and things like that. But their inputs are so high, and they just keep going up, and that's if they're able to get these inputs.
Yeah.
And then when you're looking at organics, when you're looking at a price gap, you think, well, this is what it costs them to grow this. Organics tend to have smaller, more expensive specialty packaging, and we could talk about labor and packaging and prices all day long, but organics experience a much higher pack charge. So every single place that you look, organics are getting hit hard with these increased, costs to them. So I think that everything they're asking for is fair when you're talking about all of the hurdles that the organic growers, packers, shippers, all that are overcoming. And as you see that shrinking, from 110 clear down to 90%, and how low can it go before they just can't make it work anymore? I think we need to be careful to really keep in mind all of those increases in expenses that organic growers and shippers encounter, up to and including packaging in smaller pack sizes.
Yeah. And I think part of it is we're commoditized, right? Almost all of the categories are commoditized in some respects. So if we have a higher yield and more in the barn, we end up dropping the price to move our product because it doesn't stay in the barn. It can't stay there forever. It's not like widgets or something else. And so it goes bad if we don't move it. And so because of that, we end up playing with our price and hearing and watching what has been happening with grower shippers and the input increases and everything else. I almost don't think we've gone up high enough. And I know the consumer doesn't want to hear that, but I really do believe that, if we go back even to that slide before, that 10% and that 9%, average at 10% increase, I'm sure if we polled the audience and the growers out there, if, what have your costs been like and increased in the last year, I'm going to guess that it's going to be more than 10%. And so I think a part of it is we need to educate the consumer better. And help them to understand it. And I mean, it's a hard plight. Housing costs are way up. Fuel is up. Everything that they have to do is just getting stretched thinner. And so, obviously, they don't want to hear it. But I think it's something that's going to continue, at least for the short term in the next couple of quarters. We're going to continue to see that price increase.
Yeah, I think we're going to.
Yeah. Okay, so let's look at your commodity for a little bit.
Okay.
So organic potatoes represents 4% of the total potato category, and it actually gained in volume. So remember, total organics in produce down 4.4%, but potatoes actually went up 1.2%.
Because potatoes are great.
That's true, especially organic potatoes.
That's right.
Yeah. Well, conventional potatoes slightly down, 0.8%. Not even 1%. So why do you think that is? Why do you think organic potatoes were up and conventional is down? It bucked the trend of produce completely.
It did. So I think we all know that potatoes, we kind of were short on potatoes overall last year. Everyone kind of spoke about that. There were some bare shelves back east and things like that. So Farm Fresh as a whole, we are an awfully large distributor of organic potatoes. And our organic potatoes as a percentage of what we do, is close to that 10%. So it's already higher than the potato category. And we didn't really experience last year as much of a shortage on organic potatoes as we did maybe conventional potatoes. And so that could be partly because of availability and what was on the store shelves. And it could also be the smaller pack size, people preferring not to waste, and you see organics in a smaller package on the shelf, usually 3 pounds. Mm-hmm. And so I think a lot of that could have played into maybe that increase in organic potatoes, that lack of, wanting to waste things, availability, what's on the store shelf, and all of those are playing into these numbers. And kind of like we've talked about, you start at 2020 and try to put a trend line on something that means something, to kind of glow in your crystal ball, and I just don't think we have one yet.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, well, let's compare it to organic apples really quick. So organic apples is 11% of the total apple category. So in volume for produce as a whole is 7% of total volume is organic. So organic apples, you would say, is over-indexed. They actually sell more organic apples than total produce, where organic potatoes is not, is on the flip side. And so you see a decline of almost 14%, 13.5% in organic apples, and conventional apples went up 2%, which crazy that, if anything tells you that inflation and the consumer is changing their behavior because of inflation, I'll just tell you, Red Delicious apples posted an increase this year, and is declined like over the last 8 years, every single year, and all of a sudden Red Delicious bumped in 2022. It's the cheapest apple out there.
They're cheaper, yeah.
Right? And so that the consumer is looking for something that's a little cheaper. So seeing that makes sense. So organic potatoes bucked the trend, apples didn't. Do you think the percentage of category had something to do with that?
Yes. I mean, it has to play into it. When you're looking at 4% of the category versus 11% of the category, then decreases are going to disproportionately affect those numbers.
Yeah.
So
where do you think potatoes, she likes it when I start my question off like that. Where do you think potatoes can go? Like organic potatoes, what percent of the potato category do you think organic potatoes can get to?
I think that if we can get through what we're going through now with distribution issues and inflation and cost pressures and things like that, I don't think it's unreasonable to think that you could see that be a good 10% of the potato category in store.
So you don't think it can get higher than 10%? And you know, another one.
Well, we're going from 4. How high?
Yeah, no, it's good. You know, another category that we don't have up here is, you know, carrots. And carrots, 30% of all carrots sold at retail is organic, which is a huge number, right? And packaged salads is fairly high too. So, you know that there's other categories out there that have, you know, a pretty high percentage of organic. So why are you so cautious on potatoes?
You know, I like to be cautious overall. Kind of mitigate.
Because you come from the grower side.
I do. You come from that grower side, and you know the growers are always asking me, and then if you don't perform that way, they don't care for that when you don't kind of meet those milestones.
Yeah.
But I think that you're looking at completely different commodities. There, to my knowledge, there isn't a ready-to-eat, you know, grab it off of the shelf, ready-to-eat potato, where you grab baby carrots off the shelf and you can eat those readily. You know, apples kind of the same way. And so I think that those ready-to-eat categories are going to hold a higher percentage of their category than those that you have to always prepare.
Okay. Gotcha. What about the health part of it? You know, we talked a little bit about, and I hate even bringing this up because I don't like giving them light, but the dirty dozen, it just drives me nuts. You know, I throw it away as soon as I read it. I think it's garbage, but at the same time, you know, there's that perception out there, you know, and organic is supposed to help that perception and help that health part of it. Do you think, you know, potatoes is not as worrisome, and that's why organic.
You know, it fell off. Potatoes fell off the dirty dozen. And so I think that people do look at that. And especially when their dollars are really pressed, they're thinking, you know, maybe I can, again, something you're going to prepare and cook, you know, cook and peel, things like that, that is going to affect their decision on what to buy organically when pressed for money.
Yeah.
So people do look at that. It's on talk shows. It's on, you know, they really do. You get a celebrity or someone that really is focused on the dirty dozen or focused on something like that, and it is out there and it's in the front of people's minds, I think.
Yeah. So one of the things we talked about, you know, before coming up here, and you know, one of the things that you talked about that really struck me was your growers coming to you and saying, should I plant more? Or should I get more organic ground? Should I be doing more organic, or should I hold back? And should I start, you know, going back to conventional? Mm-hmm. What are you telling them?
Go talk to Tom.
That's not a good answer, you know.
Yeah, I know. No, so I think the data can be overwhelming. And when we see something like distribution shrank, you know, organic produce shrank, it went down, growers start to worry about that. And I think that we have seen such big growth in the organic department, especially in the produce department, and those numbers increase. And I know from our perspective, growing over the last, you know, 18 years, growing from 120 acres to, you know, you're pushing 3,000 some years. So that growth just was so fast and so amazing and so exciting. And then you see these red numbers, which could you use something besides red? Because that's just so upsetting.
I know,
you know, I think the important thing is to remember not to have a knee-jerk reaction to that. It takes a long time to make your ground organic, and there's other reasons that you grow organic. A lot of people are really committed to it. We want to do what's best. They like organic. So I think that there's no need to panic yet. Let us see where the chips fall. Let's see kind of what happens, you know, in the economy. Let's see if we can kind of at least stabilize the costs going up so high. And then I think that's going to give the consumer a chance to breathe, redo their budget, reprioritize where they want to spend their money. You could even see it start to grow again. I really believe that.
Yeah, and I agree with you. by the way. I think hold is the right word, for today. It's not, don't go back. If you're pressing forward, make sure that you really know your commodity and what's going on. But really, it all depends on the consumer and if it's going to go back to normal.
Right.
Or if we're going to have another crisis, or something else that happens that's going to make them. And really, what it comes down to, the consumer before 2020 was really worried about health and thinking about long term. And even if you look across finances and you look at how much the average person was saving versus today. It's almost cut in half how much is actually in savings now in the U.S. Everybody was thinking about their future and their health and wanting to stay, and be old, and grow old and everything. And, the pandemic happened and then war hit and inflation is hitting. Now they're worried about tomorrow. They're not thinking about next week, let alone next year. So all of these things that they were thinking about before, they've kind of had to pull back and think, how am I surviving today? How am I going to pay for things and feed my children tomorrow? And so as long as we're in that state where consumers are feeling that type of pressure, where they're literally just thinking about tomorrow and not next year, I think it's going to be hard for organics. Because organics it's important, a very important part of the produce department, and it needs to stay and it needs to continue to grow. But while the consumer is in the state of the mindset that they're in right now, I think organics are going to continue to suffer a little bit, and we're not going to see the growth that we could. Now, if things start to go back to normal, if we even remember what that is, and they start to think about their health and think long term again and longevity, that's when I think organics will continue to grow. And honestly, I believe that organics could be a quarter of all produce. I truly believe that we could get there and then some if we can get back to a little stronger mindset with the consumer. And so I definitely would not, I wouldn't, tell anybody to slow down or, to stop and move back to conventional. But I think I'm with you, at least for this year, the next couple of quarters with inflation continue to move on. I think you're going to, hold is the right pattern for today.
Sit tight, Toby. The data comes back a little, with a little more information that you want to see.
With that, I think we have just a couple of minutes left, and so we're gonna. I had a couple extra slides just in case we got there.
Okay.
But I don't think we need to talk about those. We kind of went through them. But for the last 5 minutes, just wondering if there are any questions for Lonnie or I from the audience. He's going to bring a mic to you, so you don't have to scream and yell.
Over the years, do you think organic has become more mainstream, and there are other, not just in the produce section, but throughout the whole store, organic potato chips, going crazy. Everything in the store is going organic.
Yeah.
So there is the growth there that offsets the produce department. So it is still there, but so I think people now are looking for things quicker, right? Because the economy and things, they're buying the organic other things. Another thought was my other thought through listening to you guys is maybe like more merchandising, getting the merchandisers out there, talking about the attributes or the differences between the conventional and organic, and the health benefits more.
Right. Yeah.
It seems like every commodity, almost every commodity in the produce section, has some type of health benefit.
Sure.
To the consumer.
I think that's something that we have, Oreo, you see, or Coke or any of those, you see all of these advertisements and they're all constantly reaching the consumer. In produce, we don't have that luxury, we don't have the margins that they do, and so it's a lot harder to, get our message out. But really, I've coined the phrase, display and pray, because that's what we do in produce. We talk to a retailer, we beg them to put our product on the shelf, and then we sit back and we pray that the consumer actually notices it. You know, and it's not going to, it's sustainable, especially with organic. We need to be able to reach the consumer directly and not just go through the retailer and hope that the retailer is going to get that message to the consumer. So very important that we actually try and reach the consumer, and there's a lot of opportunities for that. So I want to thank you very much for joining us today. I wanted to remind you that the next session starts at 9 a.m. Thank you.